Hello and welcome. We're diving into a really big, really controversial question today. As China's economic power grows across Africa, are we actually seeing a new kind of colonialism take root?
Now that is a serious accusation. It's one you hear in the halls of power from Washington, D.C. to the top financial institutions in Africa. But is there any truth to it? Well, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to follow the evidence. And look, this isn't just a critique coming from the outside. This really powerful statement comes from Lamido Senussi, one of Africa's most respected policymakers. He's saying that the very shape of the relationship, raw materials going out, finished goods coming in, looks and feels unnervingly familiar. So the big question is, are we just watching history repeat itself? To figure that out, we have to move past the accusations and get into the hard data. Let's start by following the money, specifically the trade numbers. Okay, so an early analysis back in 2015 did exactly this. It used a pretty specific tool to measure just how tightly woven some of these African economies were becoming with China.
The tool they used is called the Relative Trade Index, or RTI. The easiest way to think about it is like a dependency meter. It basically tells you if the trade relationship between two countries is way more intense than it should be, just based on their size. If that score tips over 1, that's your first red flag. It means the link is unusually strong. And wow, the data from 2010 was pretty eye-opening. You can see 10 African nations had a dependency score over 1. But just look at the top of that list. Sudan's score was 46.4. That isn't just a strong link. We're talking about an extreme, off-the-charts level of trade dependency. So the takeaway from this first look at the data was huge. The analysis didn't just say they were trading partners. It concluded that these 10 countries were on a path to becoming Chinese zones of influence. And let's be clear, that phrase was chosen very carefully to echo the old colonial era spheres of influence. That initial finding really was a bombshell, but it was based on one single measurement from data that's now more than a decade old. To really understand what's happening, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger economic picture. So you have to wonder, right? Is how much you trade really the whole story? Or are there other, deeper forces at play that can give us a much clearer picture of what's actually going on today? Turns out, a more recent and much more thorough analysis did just that. It looked way beyond just trade volume. It dug into 4 other key areas: how perfectly the economies fit together, who owes debt to whom, where long-term investment is coming from, and, crucially, who's paying for all the new roads, railways, and ports on the continent. And this is where our investigation gets truly fascinating. Because when we take this new, bigger picture and put it side by side with the old relationships these exact same countries had with their former European colonizers, a pretty shocking pattern starts to emerge. Just take a look at this. On the left, you've got the dependency score with the old colonial power back in 1995. On the right, the score with China today. Look at Sudan again. The shift is just staggering. Its economic dependency on China today is 92 times greater than its peak dependency on the UK. This isn't just a little shift, it's a complete rewiring of its entire economic reality. And a massive part of that rewiring? It's debt. Right now, Chinese lenders hold $85 billion of African debt. That makes China, by a long shot, the continent's single largest government creditor. But it's not just about the amount of trade or debt, it's about the structure. This chart shows something called the Trade Complementarity Index. Basically, it's a score for how perfectly one country's exports match another's imports. The China-Africa score is now at 66.6. That's way higher than it ever was back in the colonial era. It means these economies are now much more deeply and intricately locked together. So here's the absolutely crucial point we have to understand. The methods are different. Yeah, the economic pattern of raw materials for finished goods might look similar, but the mechanism is totally new. The old colonial model was about direct political control, about force. This new model works through things like government-to-government loans, market-based agreements, and huge infrastructure contracts. These are the tools of finance and global commerce, not military conquest. Okay, so we followed the evidence, from trade data to debt to these massive infrastructure projects. So what's the verdict? What does this all actually mean? All right, let's break it down. First, for several African countries, this economic dependence on China isn't just like the old days. The numbers show it's actually deeper. Second, the model of influence is brand new. It's built on finance, not force.
Third, this creates very real 21st century problems, especially the high risk of debt crises. But finally, and this is a huge difference, African nations today have agency. They are at the negotiating table.
This really isn't just a small change. As the analysis puts it, what we're all witnessing here is nothing less than a fundamental transformation in the continent's external economic architecture.
So no, this is not a simple repeat of history. It's a brand new kind of dependency, one that's more complex and, in some ways, even more binding. And that leaves us with a critical question for all of us to think about. As these incredibly deep economic ties get even deeper, what does a country's independence, its sovereignty, even look like in the 21st century?